Hey everyone, I'm Akshay from Marimo team, and today I'm going to be talking about what my company works on currently, which is Marimo. It's an open source next generation Python notebook. It's got a bunch of features right here in this list. So I mentioned it's open source. It's stored purely as Python, so you can version it with Git. They're reproducible, they're shareable as web apps, you can run them as scripts, there's SQL built in, you can connect to databases and data catalogs, including our 2 data catalog, which I'll try to demo in this talk. And of course, it's AI native, because I can't talk about Python notebooks without saying those words. Okay, so Marimo is fundamentally a new kind of Python notebook. Actually, out of curiosity, how many of you guys have used Jupyter notebooks before? Alright, good enough. So, unlike traditional notebooks, Marimo notebooks are active maintainable Python programs, and they have reproducible execution syntax. And you can interact with them in 3 ways. So you can use them as a notebook, in particular a reactive notebook, meaning you run the cell, and Marimo knows what other cells need to run in order to keep code and outputs up to date. We have a bunch of interactive elements built in, but just because we're reactive and interactive doesn't mean that we're not compatible with expensive workloads. In fact, we have sort of sophisticated caching built by Dylan Manisetti, who is engineering the audience. We have lazy execution, and upcoming we have parallelization for extensive notebooks. You can run your notebook as a Python script, you can import it as a module, we have a tight integration with BUD for package management, and every Marimo notebook can be reused as an interactive web app, which you can deploy on traditional server backend, or you can share it as static HTML running in the browser with WebAssembly. And you can actually deploy it via Cloudflare workers with a single command from our CLI app. And I guess one thing I will mention is something that gets confused. This is built entirely from scratch. We have no dependencies on iPython or Jupyter. Okay, with that, I can show you a quick demo. No, that's Spotify. Okay, cool. So this is an example of a Marimo notebook. Should I zoom in more, or can you guys see it? Okay, cool. So you see some code cells that have Python, you see some Markdown, and you see some like visual output, so far it's pretty standard. There's a few things that make this special. So one thing I guess I'll mention is reactive execution. So meaning Marimo is going to keep track of the variables my code uses and the variables and references. So for example, I'm going to define a cell here. I'm going to define a variable x. And I'm going to output the variable x in the next cell. Okay, that's fine, that's normal. But what's immediately different from say Jupyter notebooks, if I change the value of x to be 1 and I run the cell, the value of the next cell, or the output of the next cell automatically updates, and you can see that it changed from 0 to 1, changed to 2, that updates as well. And importantly, Marimo is only running the subset of cells it needs to run in order to keep your outputs in sync. So unlike something like Streamlit, because it uses reruns your script from top to bottom, we have a DAG on your cells, and we just run them all in the code. You can also, what's interesting is import Marimo as a library into your notebook. Import Marimo as an object at the top. And when you do that, you get access to a bunch of things, including built-in UI formats. So for example, I can replace x here with a slider. I'll output x here, and in the next cell I'll change the reference to x dot value. I'll run all my sales cells with this button in the bottom right. And now, as I start the slider, you'll see the value of x is changing automatically. Okay, so this is kind of like a toy demo, but it lets you do some pretty interesting things. In particular, lets you explore your data pretty rapidly and in many ways. So here's one example. This notebook is showing an embedding of the MNIST data set, which is data set numerical, digits that go 0 to 9. I have a scatter plot at each point here represents a different digit. So as soon as we get a plot like this, one thing a data scientist may want to know is, well, what is the original data represented by each point? So what I can do here, I'm going to hide all the code cells, and in this case, this notebook also doubles as a little data app. I can actually make a selection here in this plot, and then I get a preview of all the underlying data that I've selected. And this is where just using basic Marimo UI elements, just a couple lines of code, something like this is kind of totally impossible in Jupyter notebook with a substantial effort. It's super easy in Marimo. Down here is like all the data that was selected from the plot. displayed as a data frame. This is how we actually display data frames in Marimo notebooks. You can see all these rich home summaries, etc. So we have an interactive notebook. We have this application view, which sort of by default just hides the code cells. And I mentioned every notebook is also a Python program, a Python script. So you can actually see that in my terminal here. I can show the first 20 lines of that file. It's just Python. Each cell here is this little function, some decorator. What's neat though is at the bottom, if I tail this, you'll see at the very end there's if name equals make or app.run. So I can actually run my notebook as a script. So in particular here, I can run it with B. My notebook is called embedding.py. If I run it, it'll just start doing stuff. In particular, it's going to start computing the embedding, save it to disk, etc. So it kind of eliminates that headache of having to refactor your Jupyter notebook into a Python module or Python script. It should have had more output, but a lot of it. Okay, so that's sort of the basics of Marimo doubling or tripling, I guess, as a reactive notebook, an app, and a script. By the way, it can also not only be deployed as a regular web app, you can also share nice slides. These slides I'm showing you are in fact the Marimo notebook, with each output being rendered as a slide. Back to the slides. Here's a vanity chart. So Marimo started working on it a couple of years ago. We open sourced it a little over a year ago. Our Hacker News launch is somewhere around this line, starts over right here. So we have a lot of stars, more stars than Jupyter Notebook, which has been out for over a decade now. People like Marimo, including some people in this audience idea, which is one thing we're talking today. Some of my favorite quotes here, which I can't say because I am not at a Python conference or a Jupyter conference. If you still use Jupyter, delete it from your computer, install Marimo. It's truly an extra notebook. React, easily version, portable, as simple as an app. Notebooks just use Marimo, they fix Python notebooks, and that's sort of the vibe that we are looking for. A lot of words, I guess, is another vibe that people sort of associate with us. It just sort of is a magical experience that every notebook is just extra work. People use Marimo for a lot of things. I didn't use to include this slide, but it's basically everything that we use a notebook for traditionally, but you just get a lot more guarantees. Data science, data engineering, machine learning, prompting LLM, some security work, and threat hunting, which I didn't know was a thing until people started telling me about it. Interactive API docs, presentations like this slide. We have a lot of people using this, including big companies like Mozilla, Hugging I hear some usage in Cloudflare. It's used pretty extensively at Stanford and Berkeley as well. And others have been listed here. The reason we're working on this, the reason I'm talking about this today, is that notebooks are used everywhere. Not just in like academia, but also like that slide that I was showing earlier in the previous presentation of these query internet database companies revenue going up to $3.63 billion. If you look at Databricks, the central interface to compute in their platform are Jupyter notebooks. They're used for interactive querying, for pipelines, etc. dashboards, so they're used everywhere. Notebooks also have problems. Traditional Jupyter notebooks actually kind of suck, which is why this is just a sample of some memes from my Twitter timeline. But famously, people use Jupyter notebooks a lot, but are often really frustrated by the experience. And I think what a lot of these things are conveying is like this idea of hidden state that you encounter in traditional notebooks. So you can have a Jupyter notebook that looks kind of like this, where you have 1 + 2 = 42. And in particular, what can happen is you can run your cells for things from sort of arbitrary way. You're mutating some shared state, you're mutating RAM, but you're not getting any guarantees about the hidden state that you're accumulating. Notebooks such as JSON files, not pure Python files. This is a directory of one of our users. Go from untitled 1 all the way up to untitled 13.5b. You can't version it with Git, you get horrendous things like this every time you try to type git diff, push your notebook up to GitHub. And in particular, Jupyter notebooks are usually broken, so there was a study from 2019 that found that of about 1 million notebooks on GitHub, only 24% were able to be run, and only 4% of those, like when you ran them, reproduced the same outputs that were serialized in them. So we try to fix notebooks, and basically we can have a social contract with their users. Marimo notebooks are special because we compose a data flow graph on them, and that puts some constraints on the kind of code that you can write. In particular, you can't redefine the same variable across multiple cells, and you can't have cycles across cells. If you agree to those constraints of those terms, you get a bunch of benefits. I can't read them all, but you get a single tool that replaces Jupyter Retrieval, Jupytext, IPy widgets, Papermill. You get Git friendliness, you get a notebook that's designed for data. Fundamentally, you just get a notebook that actually kind of works that you have components. I've already shown you can run a notebook as a script and read function and classes from it as a module. You can build them interactive OS. This one's kind of fun. Vincent, our developer relationship, built this for us. This is a little web app that lets you label which two models you prefer. These models are generating haikus about Python. And I can just sort of, just click on these buttons and say, oh, okay, I like model A's haiku better, and Fonda or whatever. And I click the next button, get a new set of haikus, and just sort of click through. This is sort of a toy example, but users do use things like this to actually work with data and label their data sets. And by the way, this slide is a Marimo notebook that has been embedded into another Marimo notebook and rendered as a single set. So because we're pure Python, we can have a composition quite easily. We're designed to work with data, so we do have SQL cells which can take data frames as inputs and animate data frames as outputs. And another way we're designed for data, I'm not going to spotlight here, is we have a pretty rich data source now, which will show all the data that you're connected to. So this is an example from the R2 data catalog data docs that I think Phil wrote. That just shows how to connect to an R2 data catalog hosted by Cloudflare. Maybe you have a few environment variables, but what's neat is that I can click this button to create a table and do some work. Objects, tables, dummy data. Sort of simple model. Three times out. 5 story, whatever it is. Try once. Okay, here we go. So right now I have an empty table hosted on our data catalog. I can click this button to write some data to it. It should actually write to Cloudflare and then show me this. In any case, oh, there we go. So there it is. So then I can actually click the sidebar, explore my data sources attached. You'll see, oh, I have some iceberg catalogs attached here. Click on this, explore the tables, and the columns sort of in my table. So really designed data and look at Jupyter. Okay, I think I'm near the end of my slides. Yeah. So that's it. Our notebook is totally free and open source. Check it out. Hit install it if you like it. Give us a star. Give us feedback. Thank you for listening.